They say Easter is about renewal, family gathering under one roof, breaking bread, sharing laughs, maybe even healing old wounds. But for me, Easter's always felt like walking into a courtroom where I'm on trial for crimes I didn't commit. Only, the jury's already decided I'm guilty. My name's Daniel. I'm 32. And if you ask my family, I'm the black sheep. Not because I did anything wrong, just because I stopped letting them control me. It started with small things. My Aunt Carol, she's the ringleader, used to give me backhanded compliments growing up. "Oh, Daniel, you're so creative. Too bad it doesn't pay the bills." Or, "You're such a dreamer. Reminds me of your dad before he ran off. Every year she hosts Easter brunch at her over-decorated house with those tacky floral arrangements and way too many dead eggs. The entire family flocks in like moths to a chandelier. Cousins, uncles, people I only ever see at funerals or food-heavy holidays. I almost skipped it this year. I stood in my apartment that morning holding the invitation, wondering if I should just go for a hike instead. But then I thought about my cousin Emily. She's the only one who ever treated me like a real person. When we were kids, used to sneak jelly beans into the attic and play cards while the adults gossiped downstairs. So I told myself I'd go for her, and maybe just things would be different. I arrived fashionably 10 minutes late as a defensive maneuver more than anything. Aunt Carol greeted me at the door with her usual tight-lipped smile, like she was pretending I hadn't ruined her day just by showing up. "Daniel," she said, air-kissing the side of my face. "Didn't expect you to make it. Thought you'd be busy with one of your projects." "Nice to see you too, Carol," I replied, letting her subtle jab roll off my shoulders. The dining room looked like an Instagram nightmare. Pastel everything, bunny-shaped napkin holders, and those sugar-coated marshmallow chicks staring into your soul. I spotted Emily near the window and made a beeline for her. She gave me a real hug, tight, warm, genuine, and whispered, "Brace yourself. They're in rare form today." Halfway through the meal, I found out what she meant. We just finished passing around the glazed ham when Aunt Carol stood up, tapped her crystal glass with a spoon, and said with theatrical cheer, "Family, I have a little announcement." I knew that tone. It was the same one she used when she told everyone was finally retiring from her position as vice principal, even though everyone knew the school board had nudged her out. The room quieted, some chuckles rippling from the younger cousins who thought they were in for a fun surprise. "We took a vote," she said, pausing like she was delivering a punchline. "And you're out of the will, Daniel." Laughter, not from everyone, but enough that I felt that warm flush crawl up my neck. I looked around. Uncle Greg was smirking into his mimosa. My cousin Jake tried to hide his snort with a napkin. Even my own mother gave a forced laugh, the kind that said, "Don't make a scene." I caught Emily's eye. Her smile had vanished. She looked like she wanted to throw her water glass. I felt the old familiar cocktail of emotions surge up. Humiliation, anger, that hollow ache in your chest when you realize your presence is more of a punchline than welcome. But this time, I didn't shrink. I didn't play it off or look away. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out a thick white envelope, and said, "Calm and clear. Good thing I brought my own." The laughter stopped just like that. I didn't raise my voice. "Stand." I just slid the envelope across the table toward Emily, who looked at me with wide, confused eyes. She opened it slowly. Her hands trembled slightly as she read. I watched her face change in real time. Confusion, then disbelief, then something deeper. Her lip quivered. And then, without warning, she burst into tears. Aunt Carol's face went pale. "Emily?" she asked, her voice suddenly shrill. "What is it? What did he give you?" Emily couldn't speak. She just turned the papers toward her mom. Aunt Carol leaned over, read one line, and staggered back like she'd been slapped. Her hand gripped the edge of table for support. That's when the murmur started. Chairs scraped, heads turned. My Uncle Greg leaned forward, trying to catch a glimpse. My mother looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Jake actually dropped his fork, and I just sat there, calm, quiet, watching the cracks form in the smug facade that had stood unchallenged my entire life. I didn't need to say anything. Not yet. I just let the silence do talking. And then Aunt Carol looked at me. Really? Looked at me and whispered, "You didn't." I smiled the same kind of smile she gave me every Easter. Tight, controlled, polite. And I said, "Oh, did?" Her hand went to her chest like she was feeling for her pearls. Except this time, there were none. Just her manicured nails tapping against the neckline of her floral blouse, searching for control. Her face, once powdered into perfection, was now drained of color. And for once in my life, Aunt Carol had nothing to say. Emily looked up at me, mascara starting to run. "Is this real?" she asked softly. I nodded. Every word. That's when the room began to shift. You could feel it, the silence rippling into unease. Cousin Jake leaned toward Greg and whispered something under his breath. My mom's jaw clenched tight like she was doing math in her head. Only Emily kept her eyes on me, wide with disbelief and something else. Relief, maybe, or guilt. See, a few. Months ago, something changed. My grandfather, Carol's father, had called me out of the blue. We hadn't spoken in years. He was 89, sharp as ever, and apparently in possession of a lot more money than people realized. He said he wanted to talk before the vultures start circling. I didn't expect much. Probably a guilt trip, maybe a lecture about family. But instead, he surprised me. "I've watched how they treat you," he said, "and I've kept quiet long enough. They think the inheritance is theirs by birthright, not by character. But you show up, even when they mock you, even when don't deserve your kindness." I almost didn't believe him. But then he handed me a folder with legal documents and said, "I want you to decide where it goes when I'm gone." It was power. Not just money, not just some old man's revenge fantasy. It was trust. He made me executive of the entire estate. Every cent, every property, every trust fund. And he'd already rewritten his will to reflect it. "Do what's fair," he said, "not what's expected." I hadn't told anyone. Not until now. Not Aunt Carol decided to turn brunch into her personal roast. So that envelope, it wasn't just some dramatic flair. It was a photocopy of the will, signed, stamped, legal. Emily had read the clause that mattered most, the one that confirmed I held the power to distribute everything, and that Aunt Carol, along with Greg, Jake, and a few others who had treated. The rest of us, like dirt for years, were explicitly removed from consideration based on their conduct. I didn't write the language. Grandpa did, but I wasn't going to argue with his honesty. Carol finally found her voice. "This is a joke. It's not legal. You forged this. This is fraud." "Nope," Emily said, wiping her eyes. "That's Uncle Robert's signature." I recognize it. I saw it 100 times growing up. "She's lying," Carol snapped. But Emily stood up, voice steady now. "You lied, Aunt Carol. For years, you made all of us believe we had no choice but to put up with your passive-aggressive garbage. You made Daniel the family punching bag just because he didn't gravel at your feet. And now you're shocked he's the one Grandpa trusted." A murmur of agreement rolled through the table. I saw my cousin Sam. Quiet, awkward. Sam nodded. Even Uncle Greg looked unsure now, like he didn't know whose side to take. "You think you can just waltz in and take what's ours?" Carol hissed at me. "I'm not taking anything," I said, finally standing. "I'm honoring his wishes. And right now, I'm just letting you all know where I stand. You wanted me out of your will. Well, turns out I'm the one holding pen." Boom! The line landed like thunder. You could practically hear jaws hitting the floor. One of the younger cousins let out a nervous laugh, quickly silenced by his mom. My mother looked like she might pass. Out! Carol's hands trembled now. "This isn't over," she muttered. "Oh, I know," said, slipping the envelope back into my bag. "I expect you'll make plenty of noise about it. But this is the part you never understood, Carol. Money doesn't make you powerful. Character does. And for once in your life, you're going to learn what it feels like to be powerless. I turned to Emily and gestured toward the hallway. You want to take a walk? Get some air. She nodded, still stunned but grateful. We left the dining room as chaos began to swirl behind us. Raised voices, half-started arguments, a family finally cracking at the seams. The sun outside was warm. The grass smelled like spring. Emily took a breath and said, "You're going to change everything, aren't you?" I looked ahead, not needing to think. I'm going to make things right. We walked for a while, just down the street, neither of us saying much. Emily clutched the envelope like it was a life raft, and I let her. She needed to hold on to something real that wasn't fake smiles, backhanded compliments, and plastic tablecloths under crystal vases. The air felt different out there, cooler, less suffocating. We could still hear faint shouting coming from the house, but I didn't look back. I'd done enough looking back in my life. Finally, she spoke. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I shrugged. I didn't want to drag you into it unless I had to, but you've always been decent to me. I remember. Who used to slip me cookies when Carol made me sit at the kids' table, even when I was 25? She smiled weakly. You were always too forgiving. Not anymore, I said. I spent too many years being the embarrassment of the family, one they pitted, laughed at, excluded. All because I didn't go the path they expected. They never saw the late nights, the freelance, gigs, tiny wins that eventually added up to something. Emily turned to me, brows furrowed. What are you going to do with it? The estate? That was the question, wasn't it? Grandpa hadn't given me any strict instructions, just a moral compass and a whole lot of faith. I'd thought about it every day, since he handed me those documents, and I'd come to one conclusion. I'm going to divide it fairly, I said. Not equally fairly. The ones who treated people with dignity will be rewarded. The ones who didn't, they'll get exactly what they gave. Emily exhaled like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. They're going to hate you. They already do, I said. At least now they have a reason. We stopped by a small bench outside the neighborhood park when we used to visit when we were kids. The wooden slats creaked as we sat down, and for a moment it almost felt like we were 10 again, giggling behind the bushes, hiding from Carol's shrill voice, demanding we come inside for picture time. Emily reached over and touched my arm. I'm glad you're the one who got it. Grandpa always said you were the only one in this family who understood people. I stared at her for a beat. You think they'll come after me? Oh, they're already planning it, she said with a small laugh. I give it an hour before Aunt Carol's got her lawyer on the phone. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and showed her a name and number at the top. Eli Goodman, estate attorney. Emily blinked. You've already had everything notarized. Witnessed, verified. Grandpa insisted, said the moment will was read. They tried to claw their way back in. She whistled low. You're 5 steps ahead. I had to be, I said. They've been playing this game for decades. I just finally learned the rules. Just then, my phone buzzed. I looked down and saw a message from my mother. Mom, can we talk? Please call me when you're alone. I stared at it for a few seconds, heart heavy, but no longer conflicted. I didn't respond. I should get back in there, Emily said, though she didn't sound thrilled about it. They're going to want answers. Let them guess for a while, I said, standing up. They've never liked being in the dark. Now they'll know how it feels. We started, walking back slowly. When we reached the house again, it looked like a war zone in disguise. Half the family had left already. Greg's car was gone, and so Jake's. I spotted Carol through the living room window, pacing with a phone to her ear, talking fast and angry. Her voice carried even through the glass. Emily gave me a look. You sure about this? I smiled. No, but that's never stopped me before. As we stepped back onto the porch, front door swung open. It was my mother. She looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually tired. like the weight of pretending had finally caught up to her. "Daniel," she said, "we need to talk." I studied her face. For once, she wasn't playing diplomat. She wasn't smiling politely to keep the peace. She looked like someone who'd finally realized peace built on silence wasn't peace at all. I nodded. All right. But this time, I talked first. She stepped aside and let me in. I walked through that familiar hallway, past the framed photos where I barely existed, and into the dining room where the table was now empty and cold. Aunt Carol was still on the phone in the corner, but when she saw me, she stopped mid-sentence. Her mouth hung open, and for the first time in my life, she looked afraid. I sat at the head of the table. My seat now. Emily sat beside me, and the room waited because what I was about to say would change everything. I took a moment to look around that room. Really look. The chipped molding by the baseboard, crooked painting of Lily's Aunt Carol insisted was original. The glimmering chandelier that never quite lit up the corners. This wasn't just a house filled with furniture and passive-aggressive centerpieces. It was a stage where they'd all rehearsed their roles for decades. The golden child, the bitter matriarch, the invisible cousin, and me, the family disappointment. Only now the script had flipped, and they didn't have a single line prepared. Aunt Carol stood frozen by the window, phone still clutched in her hand, jaw tightening as I leaned forward and finally spoke. "I'm not here to beg for a spot at your table anymore. I'm here to clean it." My mother took a step forward. Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Daniel, we didn't know." "No, Mom," I cut in. "You did know. Just didn't care enough to stop it. Every Easter, every birthday, family event, you watched them humiliate me, ignore me, and write me off. And you let it happen because keeping the peace was easier than protecting your son." She went like the words hit harder than she expected. But I didn't say them to hurt her. I said them because someone had to. "I didn't want any of this," I continued. "I didn't ask Grandpa to give me control. I didn't come here to throw it in your faces." But when he looked at this family and asked himself who actually earned the right to decide its future, he didn't choose the ones who smiled loudest or hosted the fanciest brunch. Aunt Carol finally snapped out of her daze. "You're not going to get away with this. You think you can just cut us out? We are family." "Family," I repeated. "Family doesn't vote someone out of a will and laugh about it like it's a party game. Family doesn't mock, belittle, or exclude. If you think blood entitles you to someone else's legacy, then you've already lost." Her face twisted. "I gave my life to this family." "No," I said calm and clear. "You gave your life to controlling it, and now it's over." I reached into my bag and pulled out the second envelope. This one wasn't just a copy of the will. It was a packet of formal notifications prepared with my lawyer's help for each disinherited family member. I placed it on the table. "Every one of you will receive a letter this week. Grandpa's assets will be divided in accordance with his instructions. Some of you won't be receiving anything. Others will, but with stipulations, contributions to charity, education, trusts, things that actually matter." I turned to Emily. "You'll be handling the scholarship fund." Her eyes went wide. "Wait, what? You were always the one person who tried to lift others up. Grandpa saw it. I did too. You deserve to be part of the change." She blinked fast and I saw tears welling up again. Only this time they were from something deeper. Respect, gratitude, maybe even hope. "You can't do this," Aunt Carol growled, stepping forward. "This is my house." "Not anymore," I said, standing. "Grandpa transferred the deed 3 weeks before he passed. He wanted me to use it to do something good. Maybe open a community center. Maybe sell it and fund the trust. Either way, you'll need to find a new place to host Easter brunch." Carol's hands were shaking now. "You ungrateful little." My mom finally spoke quietly, but firmly. "Carol, stop." Carol froze. My mother walked toward me, slow but sure, and did something she hadn't done since I was a teenager. She stood beside me. I should have stood up for him a long time ago. she said. But I won't stay silent anymore. Daniel's right. You can't build a family on fear and manipulation. Carol stared at her like she'd been slapped. You're taking his side? No, my mom said. I'm finally choosing a side. I could have cried, but I didn't. Just nodded, silently acknowledging the weight of that moment. The rest of the brunch unraveled fast. Those who were loyal to Carol shuffled out quickly, some in silence, others throwing last-minute digs that landed like wet tissue paper. A few cousins like Sam and Emily lingered. We sat together in the living room, eating leftover carrot cake and talking about plans. Not revenge, not control, just ideas for something better. A few weeks later, I sold the house and donated half. The proceeds to start the Robert Ellis Foundation, named after my grandfather. It supports scholarships for first-generation college students and provides small business grants to people who've been told they don't fit the mold. Emily runs it with me now. Carol tried to contest the will, of course, but the documents were airtight. Her lawyer eventually stopped returning her calls. As for my mom, she visits often now. We're not perfect, but we're trying. Sometimes healing. Looks like hard conversations over lukewarm coffee, but at least it's real. This year, Easter looked different. We hosted it in a rented hall, surrounded by laughter that didn't come with a sight of judgment. People brought their own dishes, and nobody tapped a glass to deliver a speech about who mattered more. I sat at the head of table again, but not because I demanded it, because they wanted me there. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the black sheep. I felt family.